Alright, hi guys, my name is Johnny and I teach technical events, and today I'm going to be doing an overview of the software Reaper. Now we're going to be using Reaper as our digital mixer, so a lot of the stuff we do is live events, but for this we're going to be using Reaper as our digital mixer. And as you can see, this is the default view. So when you open up Reaper, this is what it's going to look like. And first I want to show you the audio device settings. So I've just clicked on options and I click on preferences, and I've got my audio system device settings set up like this. The wave out works for me unless I've connected to an external mixer. Sometimes I connect it to an X32, or if I'm using an interface like a Focusrite or a UAD. But for now, I'm just going to be using just the internal drivers, and I'm using wave out, and it works for me. So I'm going to hit OK there. Now, if we look to the bottom left, we have two tabs down here. We've got the routing matrix, which is quite useful if we are connected to an external device, but we're not going to be using that today. And the other tab, which says mixer, that's where we're going to mainly be using this function so that we've got our layout looking like our external hardware. By default, it's given as a master channel. Now, to get started, what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag and drop some audio in here. It's going to ask me, do I want it on single track or separate tracks? I want them on separate tracks because they're all individual instruments. And I'm just going to zoom out. So I've got my zoom in and my zoom out button down here. This is going to shrink my audio from left to right, and then this would expand my audio up and down. So now it's stemmed out all my individual tracks, and I've got my live recording of a band in Reaper now. What you'll notice, so I'm trying to get my Reaper set up looking like a mixing desk. Reaper by default puts my master channel on the left, but if I hit this I button down here and I go up to master track and I go down to show on right side of mixer, my master channel is now on the right side. So it's giving me the look of how I would set up my actual hardware mixer. And if we wanted to rename any of these tracks, we can just double click on where the names on individual tracks are, and I can rename that. Luckily, the audio is already quite named already for us, and it's also got some numbers on there, so I'm going to leave the rest of those. So now let me just check that my audio is actually working. I'm going to go back to the start of project, and I'm going to hit play. So let's look at one of the individual channel strips we have here. So let's go to the kick, and we have this routing section which is going to be useful to us later on, but we've got our solo button, our mute button, and we've got our monitor recording on. That's if we was going to be recording, that would be useful there, but we're not. So we've also got our record arm button, so we can select which individual tracks we want to record to. Again, we're not going to be using that for now. And then we have our pan knob, and if we make an adjustment and we want to center it, we can double click it and it will center it. That works on the fader as well. If we change the levels, and we actually I want it to go back to unity or the middle or center. If I double click, it will just pop straight to that. Now Reaper works slightly differently in terms of how we're going to put our plugins onto each channel strip. Now, on a hardware piece of equipment, it would already be there and we'd have to activate it. Maybe it would be an on switch, maybe it would be an in switch. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to loop a section because I want to go over the EQ and compression in Reaper. And I'm just going to solo the snare channel here. And I've looped a section, and I can toggle whether or not this loops by this toggle repeat, or I can hit R as my shortcut. If I hit play, and I keep my snare playing. Now if I want to engage any of the effects, so I can hit effects here, effects on the channel here, or if I push this up where the green line is, I then get some empty slots where I can double click and add some plugins in here. One of the first things I want to put up, let's put up EQ. Now, anything that says REA is Reaper's default plugin. So let's hit REQ. And let's hit play. Now, any of these bands I can actually change. So let's say if I wanted that as a high pass, I can then change these bands from this drop down menu here. I can also add a band, so I'm not stuck on just these 4 bands of EQ. I can actually add bands if I wanted to. I'm just going to remove that for now. And then I'm going to change, click on that tab, change its frequency. Next, what I'm going to do, I've got an empty slot underneath, or I can actually open up the effects window again, and this on the side here is going to give me a list of plugins I can actually add to it. So I'm going to hit add. This time I'm going to put in compression. My section looped. This is my threshold. This is going to tell me when my compressor is going to kick in. And I can set my ratio here. I can adjust my attack here. And then, now what's different in Reaper again is my makeup gain is actually on this side. So as you can see, if I default, it defaults to 0 or infinite on the bottom. When I place a plugin on the actual channel strip itself, the dry is set to infinite and the wet is at 0. Now, makeup gain, so we can see here when I've got my snare engaged, I'm having some compression happen. If I want to then adjust my makeup gain, I do that here on the wet fader. So on my snare track, which I've highlighted, and I'm going to keep it in solo, I'm going to set up a auxiliary return track, and I'm going to put an effect on this track because I may want to send other signals to that same auxiliary return track. And how I do that is I can either do a shortcut, I can press Control T, and that's going to make me a new channel, or let's just undo that. What I can do, if I click on the last track, I'm going to go track, insert new track. It's going to insert it at the end next to that. And what I'm going to do here is in its effects, these empty slots here, I'm then going to look for, if I type in verb, my reverb rate. And this is going to be my return track. Now I'm going to pull down my dry signal because I don't want my dry signal. My dry signal is going to be over here. And this is going to be 100% wet. So I'm going to double click that. It's going to jump up to my 0. And I'm just going to roll off some of the low end out of there. And then I'm going to name this track, double clicking here as my reverb. And another cool thing that we can do is I can right click on my track and I can change its track color just to help me differentiate. Okay, well, these are all my actual input tracks. These are what my instruments are on, and then these are my return tracks. So I'm going to keep that one pink. If I click on this effect, and what happens now, if I play, snare's still playing, but nothing's going to my reverb because I still need to send it. Now, on this second half of these empty slots, we have our sends. And what we can do here is where it says sends in this drop down menu, it's giving me a list of all the other channels that I could send this signal to. And I'm going to go all the way down to my reverb, which we named. And by default, it's going to put that to 0. If I press play, and I can adjust that to taste. Okay, so that's just a basic overview of how we'd use Reaper, almost as our digital version of our hardware mixer, just to get you started.